to Repum Group's Item 24, where we take you a step beyond the standard FDD. We asked ourselves, why stop at 23 items when some of the most important insights live beyond the page? Here we're breaking down the inner workings of franchising and sharing real-life strategies and stories that drive the industry forward. Thank you, everyone, for joining another episode of Item 24. I have one of my good friends, Leslie Kuban, on today. I'm so excited to have her on. I actually saw her recently at a conference. I said, Leslie, you got to do this with me. And you said, absolutely, which I was really excited you said you would join. So Leslie, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, a little about your background and how you got involved in Frannet.
Absolutely. Nick, thank you so much. It was great to see you. Great to see you here. And I appreciate the invitation. Franchising's really been my world since I was 8. Actually, my dad left his corporate career when my brother and I were small, got into franchising and never looked back. So I kind of grew up doing this stuff, working in family businesses that are part of franchise systems. And then I ventured out. My first business when I was in my mid-20s was with mailboxes, et cetera. And I was a successful owner operator there. That's all the UPS stores now. And it was a good ride. I learned a lot from it. But interestingly, I didn't really have a service like what franchise consultants do to help me through that decision to go into that business. It worked out well for me, but was it the best long-term fit? No, it wasn't. So when I was wrapping up my days, running those stores, I learned about franchise consulting, and it was just a beautiful, using my skills, having run these businesses to parlay into helping others figure it out if it's right for them. And it's coming up on 27 years now as a franchisee and franchise consultant.
Wow, 27 years. Well, you said you started when you were 8, so that makes you very young still, right? That's right. That's
my blood since I was 8 years old.
Yeah. As I said, I've known Leslie for over a decade. And honestly, Leslie is one of the best franchise consultants in the country. There's no doubt. She's helped so many people find the right franchise. And the one thing I know about Leslie and I love about Leslie is she is so passionate about her clients and making sure it is aligned for them. And I always talk about their income goals, their lifestyle goals, because you said it just a minute ago, you had your mailbox, et cetera, but you didn't know that was good. It just was a good brand at the time, a big brand, right? And I think a lot of people think, Dunkin' Donuts are the great brands, but is that a good fit? I always use that example. Probably for most people, it's actually not, right? And so ultimately matching them with the right opportunities that fit what they're looking for, available territory, all those things make a big deal. So first question I have for you, and thinking about what you've done for as long as you have, what do you think is a big part of evaluating brands, but more importantly, for the candidate coming in, when you start talking to them, how do you help them go through that process to really get to a point of clarity around, hey, this is the 4 or 5 or 2, kind of franchises they should be looking at?
Yes. And as you mentioned a second ago, this is a puzzle with a variety of different pieces, and those pieces have to all fit together for particular opportunity to be aligned for someone. And a lot of times when people are new at this, maybe they haven't looked at this before, they're just starting to think about it. They come into it often with some very common perceptions that they are pleasantly surprised are not true in reality. I think a lot of people believe that their choices are going to be confined by their resume and their diploma. Whatever they got their education in, whatever industries they've worked in their prior career, whatever kind of, business they've owned before, they think that their choices in franchising are going to just be some entrepreneurial version of that, which most of the time is not true. It's very far from the truth. And I think what's surprising to people is when they get into this and they understand that most franchise brands don't want people who have deep industry experience in their business, that actually can work against them, because when people do, they're bringing their biases and their habits about what success in that industry is. And the odds are just too high that those biases and preconceived notions are going to conflict with the franchisor's playbook for success, which is what somebody is buying. So there are, of course, exceptions, but by and large, especially in these service industries that we work with, by and large, they would prefer someone have the right transferable skills, whether that's project management or sales or client services or leadership, whatever. That has been cultivated somewhere else, but they would prefer a on their industry and just let them train them so they don't have to fight with a franchisee on how to do the business right. So and what's nice about that is when people get into this and they understand that and they validate that in their due diligence, it's really cool. It opens up their door of possibilities beyond what they thought entering the process.
Yeah, I mean, all that is so true. I mean, what I liked what you said there about just the transferable skills, because I think we work with a lot of emerging brands, and oftentimes, and I'm not saying this is a bad candidate, but they always want the candidate that owned 10 of something else, 100 of something else, right? And I always tell them, like, that's great, but you got to proceed cautiously with those individuals because they might have been successful in another system, but that doesn't mean that those skills are good for your system. And ultimately, clean slate, not done it before, transferable skills is probably easier to mold into your system, into being successful in your system, not kind of mold, but make sure that you take the skills and like make sure it can happen, make sure the success happens as a result of it. So, that kind of leads me to my next question, which is when you think of brands that you evaluate, obviously you have a couple of hundred brands you could look at within the Frannet portfolio, but what stands out for you of saying, all right, these are the brands I want to show my candidates and that I feel confident in that I'm going to put this person in front of this brand. And I feel as if they decide and the brand decides a good fit on both sides, that they're going to have success in it or have the best chance for success. We all know it's not guaranteed, but.
So, as you know, inside and out, franchise offerings are like snowflakes. Each one is different, and brands are at different places in their own development and in their own experience. So I think what I like to see is when a brand is realistic, they're presenting realistic and appropriate expectations for what they have to offer. And that is going to be different for an emerging brand versus something that's been around for 15 years and has 200 open operating units. It's just a very different animal. And the more mature brands have their benefits, emerging brands have their benefits. They're just different benefits. And so as long and there can be more risk with emerging brands, but there can also be a lot of exciting opportunities and more room for growth and more room for creativity and helping refine that playbook as it grows. So I think there's a lot of exciting benefits for being a part of an emerging brand, but most of the time that younger brand they're just not going to be as far along in some of their training and support structures as more mature brands are going to be. And that's okay as long as they are realistically communicating that to me, a franchise consultant, so that I can pass that on to our clients when we're helping them evaluate what's best for them. So, and the candidates have to be okay with that too. If they want the benefits of a younger brand, they have to be okay. Playbook is not probably as buttoned up as something that is more mature, and that may be very well worth it for the benefits. So as long as we're above board and transparent and we have self-awareness, the brands need to have self-awareness around where they are.
Yeah, it's so important when we talk about the brands we work at Repum. Like we have some brands that have been, have 150 units open in a very different place on who they are and their identity as a brand versus one that started franchising 1 year ago and has, 2 franchisees. And so it's really just us being like hidden between the eyes of like, this is who you are today. Just own that and be good with it. And your franchisees will help with you on that, right? On that front, wherever you are in the, in the evolution of your brand, whether you're a mature brand or a new one.
Exactly.
Yeah. And obviously the candidates are the most important thing here, right? I was just talking about responsible franchising. And I said, the number one thing for me is franchisors just being responsible at the end of the day for relationship-based franchising. Look, nothing's ever perfect, right? We're entrepreneurs for a reason. And the reason is because it's not all figured out. Now, the franchisors should have a lot figured out, but working together when problems occur and kind of meeting in the middle to figure it out and game planning on how to get through the problem together is really the most important thing, right? And so when you think of the candidates you work with, what are the top things that are red flags for you in looking at this is what you should be looking out for, Mr. Candidate or Mrs. Candidate, when you start evaluating brands? What are the things that are like complete red flags, like run for the hills if you see these things?
Well, there's several.
Yeah,
And so,
always, there's ton, right? Yeah.
yes. No, I think, where people, when when I see the miss, it's actually not lack of capital or lack of talent. Most of the time with people, it's their misconception about what kind of time and commitment this is going to take.
Yep. Yep.
So they want something that doesn't take any time, and that's just not franchising. Like, that's not owning a business. And
Yes. Go
so,
invest in stocks or something if you want that,
yeah,
right?
well, and there are other avenues, but there's tremendous benefits in owning a business. But especially in those first couple of years, it's just going to take time. So, and there are definitely, we hear these words, Nick. I know we all know them: manager run models, executive
Yeah.
run models. I'm not even going to say the A word or the P word,
Yeah.
absentee, passive. I just don't do that because it doesn't exist. And so, I think a big red flag is when someone can't even schedule an appointment with me. If they don't have time to talk to me, then they don't have time to run a business.
So true.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so number 1 is time availability. Number 2 is just a, maybe expectation that this is gonna be easy somehow. People, I think, sometimes equate franchise, well, it's a business in a box. I just gotta turn the key and run the motor and it goes. It still takes the time, it still takes the commitment. There's still a learning curve. So I think, and again, that's on me and that's on you to help
Yep.
folks new to this understand what it's really going to take so that they can decide if they feel it's the right time for them or if it's really the right thing for them to do.
I've said this forever. It's like the build them and they will come unicorn scenario is very much just a unicorn. There's very few brands that you open it and there's lines out the door. Most, if not 99% of brands, you really have to build it as the owner. And whether it's with employees or a combination of the two, which is usually the case, that's really what gets you to be successful. And you're right. It takes several years to build a business. Like, I don't think anybody, if you ask any business expert, like, you're going to start your business tomorrow and in 1 year, you're going to be, incredibly successful and profitable. That's not how business works. It just takes time. But if they understand that coming into it and they know they're building in the right direction, they can feel a little more comfortable with it. And to your point, it's just setting the expectations from the get-go the right way. Otherwise, they're saying, what's going on here? And why is this not working? When it really is in probably most cases, right? So,
Right, it's working, but when it is somehow not aligned with when the expectation was not appropriate in the beginning, even though something is on track, it doesn't feel like it. So,
right. That's exactly right.
that's what we all need to do. Consultants, franchisors, everybody that works around just needs to be, helping folks set appropriate expectations, and then people have to be honest with themselves as well. And sometimes that's a mismatch too. People, sometimes, especially if they've been very successful in their prior career, it's not a direct translation. And so the more humble people are about coming to something that is new, the better off they're going to be.
Yeah, I always say check your ego at the door because no one wants to hear it, and stay within the guardrails of the system. And, you want to be successful first. So that's the most important thing, and just follow the system. And after a year or two, you can start suggesting things. I think one of the things that I always talk about is too many, new franchisees coming in. We all have great experiences, most likely in our background, and they want to apply those with good intentions right up front. But ultimately, they haven't become successful yet. So don't try to disprove the system or make it better when you haven't even made $1 yet, right? And that's what I always tell them. Like, just put your head down, make it work, get to a profitable state, then start bringing in new suggestions to the franchisor for improvements and so on. And I think that's a really important thing for them to understand. And again, it's setting the expectations properly. So, well,
Agreed.
Leslie, thank you very much for joining today. I really appreciate it. As I said, I was so excited you said you would join, and more excited that you are on here to be able to tell everyone how you've been so successful with placing so many great candidates over the few decades you've been doing this, and hopefully continue to do it long into the future. Although I know you have other things you want to do as well, like everybody. But again, appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Nick. So good to see you.
You too.